Oh. In this video, I'm going to show you how to code a simple PHP program. Hey, it's Christopher Bradley here with Keeping It Code, where we help you bring your imagination to life through coding. In today's video, I want to take the time to walk through this PHP script that I recently made. So my goal with this would be to just help newcomers to PHP, newcomers to programming in general, understand a little bit more about the language and the methodology behind everything. So a bit of a backstory on this. I just recently got this camera, and well, I took a ton of pictures, just video pictures. Yeah, I was just just going right. So here's the problem. I didn't have any space left on my hard drive. I had like 15 gigs. So I needed a way to only copy a select few, the keepers, the only the images and videos that I wanted to save, because my SD card had hundreds, if not a couple thousand on there. So it was kind of a daunting task to go through and copy paste. What I ended up doing was, well, I created a program to copy paste for me. I noticed that every single image had a unique identifier. So I would go through, just jot down the unique identifier, build this list out, and then plug it into this script, and it would copy them from that directory and organize them to whatever directories I had set up. And it works pretty well. Now, before we get into this, if you find value in my content and would like to see more, please go ahead, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button if that is something you are into. All right, let's get into this. Alright guys, now diving into this, you can see that there is kind of a lot going on. This one file has 142 lines of code. It's kind of the meat and potatoes of everything. But don't worry, a lot of that's comments, a lot of that is spacing. It's not that complex. In here we have a class called Copy Ninja. Now, if you're not familiar with the class, it just represents an entity. It has a bunch of attributes, properties, things that give it characteristics. So for example, a class could be human, and within that class it would have a property for gender, a property for hair color, a property for maybe what clothes you're wearing that day. Just everything that encompasses you, that defines you. Now with a class, also like humans, you can have multiple of the same thing, sort of. So you have me, and then there's you. Well, my hair color may be different from yours, and my eye color may be different, but whatever it is, we each have our unique properties. So a class is no different. We're both a human class, but you have your own instance with your own characteristics and properties, and I am my own with my own unique characteristics and properties. But we still share the same structure because we're the same class. We're just separate instances of that class, if that makes sense. Here, with our script, we're only expecting one instance, and that's when we execute the script. It's going to what's called instantiate this class, this object. It'll create it. All the properties and everything get defined, and then we can work with it. We can use that. Now at the top here we have our constants, which are they're static variables, which are variables that just do not change. So in this case, we're just defining what type of extensions that our files are going to use. That's something that we don't want to modify. It'll just be what it is. So MP4, JPEG, CR3, which CR3 is like a raw format that the camera shoots in. So we're defining those because we want to use them later in our code. So constants are a great way to make sure that the value of something never changes, and it's also reusable so that you don't have to type out MP4, JPEG, all those strings each and every time that you want to use them. All right, coming below the constants, we have our protected variables. Now, just ignore this protected right here. It's basically just signifying kind of like access levels, what can actually manipulate this variable, but let's not worry about it right now. What I want to focus your attention on is this $sign. If you're new to PHP, well, get used to $signs, because this is how you declare and use variables in your code. All right, now coming down below the variables, we have our first function that we're coming across, and this is called the Copy Ninja constructor. Now the construct is, it's just a PHP method. You'll find it, I think, in many languages. That is kind of the default message that's ran whenever the class is instantiated. So let me show you what I mean. So when we do new Copy Ninja, what is going to happen next? We will hit that construct method and be right here. It's going to go ahead and plug in the source directory, export directory, and as you can see, PHP Storm has so generously and cleverly let us know that this is what the values of those two variables now are. Now, we didn't touch on this earlier. This with that pointer, this is referring to the class Copy Ninja. So if we command click for Mac, or I think on Windows it would be control click, pointing to that protected variable that we defined earlier. Now this is just a syntax. You'll see it used anywhere you interact with a class and call a function inside of it, or accessing properties inside of it. You'll always have to use this the pointer. Now if we did have a variable inside here, like such as this, then we can refer to it just by typing $test. Okay. Now, and another thing, I don't think we touched base on these semicolons. Yeah, what are these guys? These are your line endings. So with every PHP line, well, not every, but in most cases, you will have a semicolon. For example, you'll see like this if statement, it doesn't have a semicolon, but your individual statements of code will. So keep that in mind. All right, we're to our first if statement. Now, I think that is pretty simple enough to understand. This is just weeding out the weak, saying if you didn't provide anything for the, if you provided an empty array, then well, we're not going to execute this. Now we go into copy files. Now things really start to get grindy in here, right? Like there's a lot going on. Now, full disclosure, I didn't create this application to be some super freaking reusable, like large scale program. Like this was a straight up, man, I need something that's gonna do exactly what I need. This shows you just what is raw PHP like. Like what is it? All right, so we're calling this copy files. Now notice this is a private function. Again, we haven't touched on the private, protected, public too much, but we're just defining the scope of this. We don't want anything outside of this class to accidentally call copy files. We want to control it only directly from this call right here. First things, we need to load a list of all our files. So scan directory, that's exactly what it does. We pass it our source directory. It's going to give us an array of all of the files. Pop open my debugger, step over that. Boom, 670. Now look at that. Now take note real quick. This is an array. This is what an array looks like. Here on the left side is what's called your key, and on the right is your value. So that's what's called a key value pair. Whenever we define an array, for example, like this, whenever you define a single value like that, it ends up looking like this. It would be CR3 and then MP4 as the value, and these the keys here are auto created. Arrays start at 0 and go up from there. So 0 is actually your first element. Right, moving back, getting sidetracked. Here we are. We have our array, 670 entries. Holy moly. All right, that's great though. Now we know what all the files in that folder are. Moving along, we have now defined all these variables that we need. We have an array for our files to copy, which we're going to populate later on. So here's the thing. We have to map. All right, so real I don't want this, I don't want this to get too confusing. So let's just break this down. What is going on? Chris, you said this was for beginners. Holy like what are you doing to me, bro? All right. Look. It's cool, man. I got you. All right, let's break it down here. We call copy files. We've scanned the directory. We've gotten a list of all the files that exist in that directory. Why did we do that? Well, if you note back to our little string over here, it's only IDs. Now, these images, what are their names? img5149.cr3, img5150.cr3. We have to map these identifiers to an actual file. And that's what we're doing here. Let's walk through it. All right. For each files as file, for each statements means we are just iterating over that whole list. So it's going to start here at the very first one, 0. It's going to execute this block of code on it. And when it reaches this point between here, it's going to go to the second one, execute the code, go to the third one, execute the code. You get it, right? Now we've got a little bit of trickiness going on here. You'll see within here we have a nested for each. I did it. I did. It's nested. That's not a bad habit, but it can get confusing. So let's walk through it slowly. So our wrapping for each is going through each of the files, starting here, then go do, right? So let's just start with, let's go to number 2, because that actually has an image name. Let's use that as an example. So it's already went douche, 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 and is hit here, okay? Name equal explode. A delimiter underscore with a file. Now, what does file represent in that case? All right, let's skip ahead. Boom, boom. Now we actually have one with. All right, I just realized we actually need to set ourselves up to have a working example. So let's just make this first one something that we actually want to copy. Okay. Boom. Skipping ahead, here we are. Bing, here we are. Now, we actually have our first image, image 5149, which should be on our selection. Yeah, 5149, very first one. Awesome. Okay, so what are we doing first? What is name going to become? Name. Yeah, that is what explode does. Exactly that. It takes a string, we pass it a delimiter, which is the character that we want to break on, and then we passed it a parameter of the actual array. So we exploded this string and made it into an array. So you can see the original file was underscores image underscore 5149.cr3, and by exploding on a delimiter, we have this result. It has placed, it's removed the underscores and then just left us with the bite-sized chunks of everything, which is exactly what we want. Oh yeah, cool, man. I forgot I did this actually. This is a regular expression. Now, what I'm doing here is I only want the piece that has the number. I know that the way that the image is structured, there's going to be a unique identifier, a number. So I did this a little dynamically because I noticed there were some slight variations in the name of every single file. For example, some would have underscore image 5149 like you see here, and then some would not have the trailing underscore and they would just be image 5149. So by doing this, what happens is it's going to iterate over each piece of this name array, each element. And then once it finds one that does contain integers, which in this case would be 5149, let's go ahead and skip ahead. Boom. What's going to happen here? Bam, we've got our ID. So array shift is just this is a lot of array play, and I apologize because it is a little difficult to follow along here. But look, essentially we've just grabbed the ID. I forget, let's double check shift. Oh yeah. So what I did here was explode. We can run it in the simulator and I'll show you what the result of that was. Boom. So again, how we did earlier with the underscores, we were like, I want to remove the underscores and just get the actual nuggets of information. We took that period off the original string, the 5149.cr3, blew that period off of it, came out with 5149 and then cr3 as separate elements, and array shift just takes the very first one. So we know the first one is always going to be the integer that we need. Boom, got it. Have the ID, and now we do the same thing, but we're going to get that extension, which is cr3. Now we know here is the ID, and here's the extension. And this is going to just be used as part of data for this next set. All right. Now we're going to do an array function, and this is just searching our whitelist array. Now, what is our whitelist? What are you talking about, Chris? Like, come reel it back in here for me a minute. You know, talk to me through this for just a moment. The camera can save in many different formats, so I needed a way to specify, like, hey, I only want to grab JPEGs, or I only want to grab RAWs, or I only want to get MP4s, whatever kind of file extension I had. So I built this little extension whitelist, and all I'm doing here is saying, what is the extension of the file? The ext is cr3 in this case, and I want to check if that value exists inside my whitelist. Now, a whitelist is just specifying which file extensions that are acceptable. So in this case, cr3 does exist in the whitelist, so an array is going to return true, and we can evaluate that, show you. Boom. An array is to say is cr3 in this extension whitelist array. All right, moving on. We've done the same thing with the ID. So this if statement has just said if this is true and this is true and this is not true, then we're going to add the file to a list that we're going to read later to copy. So this was validating everything and saying, okay, this is actually one of the files that we want to copy later on. So once we do that, boom, boom, let's go look at our files to copy list. Bam, we've got the image name right there. Oh, let me take your attention to this. A break. I love breaks. So inside of a for each, when it hits a break, it's going to cause it to exit that for each. Now this is good, for example, in here where I'm iterating over something, and once I've executed this piece of code, I want to get out of that iteration. Maybe, let's just say, for example, there's 100 elements, and you're searching through all 100 of these to find just one. And you find that one, and you grab the data from it, and you put it over here to use it later. Now, you don't want to continue your iteration through however remaining elements there are. That would be pointless. You've got the data you need. It's time to get out, and that's where a break comes in handy. It's going to go ahead and exit that iteration sequence early so that you can save those microseconds of whatever it is, of not having to continue processing that array for something you don't need. All right, so we're breaking out of that. Now, since we have a nested for each, this is only going to break out of this one we were in to build out that name. So it's going to continue back at this point onto the next ID. Now we're no longer on 5149. We have moved on to 5150. Now it's just going to keep doing the same thing. It's going to go through here. If it's an integer, if it actually matches a selection file, then we will add it to this big list. So skipping ahead, wait, we got to remove that one. Yeah. All right, look, files to copy. How many do we have? 13. That's an unlucky number. I don't like it. Let's roll with it though, because it starts at 0 and it goes to 12. It's not really, you know what I'm saying? I think we're good. We have our list of files to copy. That piece of logic just went over everything, went through all 670 files that were in that list and found the ones that we want to copy. Ah, I love it, man. I love when things work. Really, that's awesome. Okay, now we're gonna do this first if statement. We're basically saying you better have some files to copy, or we're not going to execute the code within inside here. So if not empty, then we're going to continue to execute inside here. If it were empty, it wouldn't execute any code within those brackets, and since there's no more code, well, that would just be the end of everything. But luckily in our case, boom, we've got files to copy. All right, I'm going to focus your attention on what is important here. Back to another beautiful for each. We're going to flip over the files to copy. So one by one, we're going to process them. Okay, so boom, starting with the first one, element 0, image 5149. What is the extension going to be? Boom. Well, we know what it's going to be. It's CR3, right? It's the same thing. Array pop is the opposite of array shift, because array shift shifts an element off the beginning of an array, which would be element 0 or whatever the first element key is. And let me explain that real quick. It doesn't always have to be 0 with an array. You can actually specify what you want your key to be. So instead of keeping it just a standard 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can make your key anything, such as a string, hello as one, world as the other. It doesn't matter. You can use a string as an identifier. You can use an integer as an identifier. It's very versatile. So Siri thought I was talking to her. Yeah. Later, Siri. All right. So we're going to array pop that extension off the end of this. Boom, we've got it. CR3. Now, try catch these. This is great. So the way the try catch works is you have a try block of code and then you have a catch block of code. So it's going to execute what's in the try, and if an error happens, rather than just crashing your whole program, it's going to execute what's inside the catch. And this is a great way to, for example, in here we have output, which is going to be an error message. So if an error did occur, boom, it's going to catch the error, not crash the program, and it's going to continue on to the next one. If we didn't have the try catch in here and an error did occur during this copy, it would just crash. The for each would no longer continue. The whole program would just, but at least this way, it'll catch the error, continue business as normal after it has logged that it happened, and we can revisit it later on. Since we're logging that information, we can review it. All right, so try to copy. So copy is just a PHP method that does exactly what it says. It's going to actually copy the file. It takes a source directory and a destination directory, it takes a source file and a destination file, which is going to be the full directory name and file name. So for example, evaluate that, boom, result, the /volumes all the way down to the image with the extension on it. Now, if we allow that to execute, that should copy. All right, if you excuse me for a moment, I have to dissect this one a little bit. This is a great time to talk about is set. I love is set. And there's a lot of interesting things going on here. All right, so this is what is a shorthand if statement. Like, oh, I know, like come on, man, I'm new to this. Why are you talking about what is shorthand? It's good stuff. Yeah, it's good stuff. Shorthand ifs. Let's walk through it. Is set. This is just a Boolean statement saying, look, we're checking this counts array. Counts is an array. We can double check that. Look, we made it up here. Counts equal array. We have a key total and another key error with their value 0, 0. This is a perfect example of what I talked about earlier, where instead of having 0, 1, 2, 3, those type of keys, you can specify a string as your key. It's just a way to access that value at a later time. So here we go. Is set counts extension. All right, so with the is set, this is just going to return a Boolean value. So true or false. Is the counts value, or excuse me, is the counts key, which would be the extension in our case CR3. So is counts CR3 set? No, we only have counts total and count error. There's no count CR3. If this is true, we want to just add 1 to whatever the value was. So for example, it's actually gonna, once this is declared, it would look like this. Boom. Let's go ahead and push forward. Oh. All right, as we can see now, if you go to your counts array, it's actually added CR3. So what happened here, this is the same exact way of doing diff. If is said counts ext, which again is just, this is counts as an array, and we want to access the key, which is CR3. So we're passing the extension variable, which is CR3. Then we would do this. Otherwise, we would do this. That's all it's saying. So you can do your conditional check here, question mark, and then if it's true, we're executing this. If it's false, we're executing this, whatever that was evaluated to. So if you did, you could, 0 equal 1, that would always evaluate default, or 0 equal 0, that's always true. Any condition, that makes sense. Okay, I love shorthand though. You'll use a lot because why would you want to write something like that? It just takes up a lot when you could accomplish it in this small thing. So in this case, boom, we're just creating a log array. Like later on I want to dump out and say, okay, hey, look, we copied 17 files. 17 were successful. There were no errors. Everything is good. That's what we're building out here. So that's what this counts array is. It's just a place for us to keep track of what's going on. What are we processing? So let's go ahead, skip ahead for this. Let it do its thing. Boom. All right. Now back in the catch, if something had caught an error, we would have incremented that counts error. So if it is above 0, we know it's been incremented. Now real quick, this plus plus, this is the same thing as if we had said counts equal count. That would be the same thing as if we said this. Boom. There you go. It's just like saying that, but this is a shorthand. It's great. It's great to use. So you can do the plus plus, and that just means that we're going to take the value that is there. So if it's 0 and we do plus plus on it, it's going to turn to 1, and it's actually going to set that value. You can also do the opposite, I think, with minus minus. All right, moving along here, we're building out our output. How do we have any errors? Look, now, total 13, 0 errors. We copied 13 CR3 files. Awesome. That's what we want to see. All right, and this is a for each loop going through and building out all the outputs. So we can skip to there. Boom. Now we built our output lines. This is just a text that we want to display. What does it contain? Total errors 0, copy 13 CR3s, total copy 13, and what's the export directory, right? Boom. Finished. Yeah. Now if we go to our console, a bunch of warnings that something we can debug and figure out, but they're not causing any problems. Here we go. Now echo, this is a very basic one. Echo is, if in our context, if you were in the terminal, for example, boom, yeah, there we go. So if you're in terminal and you ran that, then you're going to end up with that echo dumping out everything on that line for you. All right, guys, we made it through the bulk of the actual code for this. Now there is a lot that we didn't touch on. There's a lot going on with this, a lot of logic, a lot of syntax. So let me just address that real quick. Like, try not to get overwhelmed with this. If you're new to it, if you're new to a language, if you're new to programming in general, and even if you're experienced and have been doing it for a very long time, you're still going to have to rely on resources. Like, a lot of this isn't memorized. You know, after a while, you can write fluently, but you still will be researching things on Google. I still work with the web browser open to look up things as I'm coding. Like, what is array shift? What is array pop? I can't remember. There are things I've used in the past, but I really don't use them enough to know. So there is a lot going on, and it takes time. But you just have to start with the basics and just add the little building blocks and go up. If you have any questions, guys, please leave a comment and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for sticking around this long, and I appreciate you guys watching. Have a good day.